Episode 2 for Daleks.
Hello and welcome back to Into the Black Archive, the podcast where we are attempting to get through every single Doctor Who episode. Even the classic ones. Yes, we're not kidding. The whole thing will be here for years.
It may kill us, but we'll see. If so, it'll be broadcasted our death, which is, just as good.
And on that touching and heartwarming note, I'd like to introduce my co-host Owen Cranston.
Good morning. I bring the cheer to this podcast.
And I'm James Stevenson, and I'm the other co-host of this madness.
The only thing which goes on longer than all the Doctor Who episodes is us attempting to record. That's all I'm going to say. The amount of time it's taken us to try to record this, we could have recorded all the episode, the next month's podcast, in the time it took us to record this 1.5 hour show.
Really, what we're doing with this podcast is we're doing 25% podcast, but we actually enjoy the tech issues more, so we do that for a lot longer. Anyway, this is episode 2 of Into the Black Archive, which means we have moved past An Unearthly Child and our introductions to Will and to Susan and to Ian and to Barbara. But now we're getting introduced to a new character.
Can I just ask? Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, William Hartnell.
Yeah, William Hartnell.
I thought you meant the character. I was thinking, who the hell is Will?
Yeah, I realised that as I said it.
But it's very confused.
It's a nice way to differentiate between the 13 Doctors and the War One. It's perfectly fine. But one thing you can't mistake is the certain aliens we got introduced to in this episode, which is helpfully called the Daleks.
Not to be mistaken with Daleks.
Yes, not to be mistaken with the 2005 Dalek. This is the 1963 Terry Nation penned 7-part serial, The Daleks.
Yes, 7 long episodes.
They are long, aren't they? Tell you what, in terms of, let's go move away from long, and I'm going to ask you for short. Can you give me the synopsis of the 7 parts of The Daleks, Owen, in 1 minute? I'll time you. Start now.
In their rush to escape the tribe of Gum, the Doctor Who sets random coordinates in the TARDIS to get away quickly, ending up in a seemingly dead world, Skaro. Our time-travelling group end up in hot water, and the Doctor tries to trick his companions into travelling into a deserted city, only to find out it's splitting out for bits with metal aliens calling themselves Daleks. They manage to escape capture after getting help from pacifist fouls. However, Team TARDIS can't yet escape, with the Doctor's ploy backfiring. They cannot leave Skaro without facing the Daleks again. Ian has to go back against his moral code to propel the Fouls to fight against the Daleks to allow the Doctor and his companion to escape. It's a race against time to set off before a nuclear bomb is set off.
See, that sounds like the plot of like a 90-minute movie, and you did do it in 60 seconds quite comfortably. I think we did it in 45 there.
I got panicked towards the end. I don't know if you could tell.
You sounded panicked at the start. But anyway, it sounds like a 90-minute movie, I guess, in plot. But it's about 3 hours long, this.
Yeah, which I think comes on to my first complaint about it. It has good set pieces, but my God, do some parts drag.
It takes a lot of time to get to the bits you want in this serial. A lot of time.
Like, there's one instant in episode 2 where Susan has to run to the TARDIS. We'll go back onto a bit more ordering, but this kind of feeds into this. It seems to take her around just 3 minutes of running through forests, where nothing else happens. It's just her rapidly running through the forest and glancing backwards at herself.
Yeah, and that's part 2. I mean, part 1, the Daleks don't show up until right at the end of part 1. So you're spending the first 24 minutes of this just kind of, this is a dead planet, okay, this foliage isn't moving, what the hell's going on?
I sort of like that, though. Because our first episode of The Unearthly Child, it was very much a crash, these are your companions, crash, this is the storyline, crash, we're running away. At least at the beginning of this one here, we had a short period of time where we were getting to know the characters. So because last week we were complaining about Barbara and Susan not really having much. But I felt that little bit at the beginning sort of gave us time to sort of, well, we didn't really get to know them in that sort of first bit. We got more comfortable in their company.
Yeah, and I do like the part in part one where Susan and Barbara have that conversation at the side of the TARDIS, because Susan essentially thinks that she's had a hand touch her shoulder, and the Doctor has immediately dismissed it because it's illogical and can't have happened because the planet is dead. What they don't know is Skaro is dead. And Barbara goes over and they have this really nice emotional conversation, Barbara saying that she believes Susan, and it's really nice.
It's a really nice way of us meeting the characters. And also, can I just say, for two teachers, they are teachers.
Oh,
you
yeah,
can tell.
Full-on teachers. The dynamics are getting stronger, definitely, as they go on, and you start to see where people's roles are really beginning to fit.
Yeah, and I think the person who goes for the biggest character arc in this episode is Susan.
Yeah, by miles.
I think while I was criticising the overextended run for TARDIS, it took forever. But as soon as she's done that point, she's faced her fears of running alone through this Forbidden Forest, which she's fairly sure something else is in there with her.
Yeah,
she actually
big
becomes
challenge.
so much more brave. Last episode we were complaining about her screaming at everything. Like she at one point straight up shoves herself in front of a Dalek to try to trick him.
Yeah, although, I mean, she is screaming for a lot of this episode. She screams with a bravery that she didn't have before. And she has a really nice arc in this.
I think she screams with more bravery, but she actually is trying to put herself into situations rather than just going, oh god, the Doctor's not here, which is essentially what happened last episode.
Yeah, she was basically powerless. And that was one of my criticisms of Unhealthily Child, is you had Susan and Barbara, who just kind of came across as very women as depicted by men in the 1960s, very reliant and not very independent as characters. But that is improved on in this episode. It is improved on.
Yeah, because there is a little bit of hints of it here and there, but you could definitely see which Barbara is getting her hands dirty. She's volunteering to wander off to different places. She's wandering caves with the fowls and accidentally dropping them, but we can ignore that.
Yeah, don't worry about that. Barbara gets scot-free for killings of aliens. It's no problem.
Ian, I feel like he's still the moral compass of this group, like what I said last week.
Yeah. What I was going to say about Ian, and I've been saving this point for when we were going to chat about it, is that Ian is trying to be what he thinks the Doctor should be.
It feels like there's a particular point where they're having the debate around whether they should try to get the Fowls to attack, where it seems to be they all seem to be trying to lead the Doctor down the right path, particularly Ian.
Well, let's take this chronologically then, or as chronologically as we can.
I just want to quickly say two things. Actually, I think maybe only one thing, particularly about the Doctor's character through this. Particularly towards the end, I feel like he was starting to see he might actually need to get involved in things.
Yes.
Because previously, from a lot of this episode and the episode previously, he's a lot of let's just come here then leave again, or even not even go there. Let's take some rock samples and leave. But towards the end, when he's facing with Daleks, which we'll go into more depth later, he generally seems to feel like he might need to actually start not being God, but he needs to actually start involving himself in things.
Yeah, he needs to interfere for the common good, which is really the whole theme of the show. And yeah, it's starting to come through, especially by right at the end, when the true extent of the evil is unfurled.
And it is actually two things I was going to say.
All right.
So this is going to be a different look of character. It's going to be look at character from now and what it is 60 years in the future to now. And that's the Daleks. How the Daleks are characterised here. We'll go more in depth about their influences in them and the subtext and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But they seem to be a lot more intelligent here than they do in modern stuff.
The Daleks
do you
are
agree?
slightly... Yeah, I do. I think the Daleks are slightly more human. Slightly more.
Current Who, it's Daleks seem to be shoot, but exterminate. Oh, look, we've just killed everyone. We need to take over the planet. Here it was discuss what we're going to do. Slightly sadistic with let's make them feel comfortable and then kill them. Let's lure everyone into a trap. And it seems to be a lot more talking between them rather than hive-minding it.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very rare that in modern Who you've had conversations really with Daleks, or at least conversations with Daleks that haven't or aren't markedly known as different. Like, we've seen, like, Dalek Khan or something, but Dalek Khan, essentially, his mind has been destroyed by the Time War, so he's allowed to talk in mad things. There was also that Victory of the Daleks one, wasn't there? When the World War II one with Matt Smith, where he gets to the Dalek ship and the new Daleks are there and the old Daleks are like, we are inferior, and they do all that stuff.
equally, with that bit there's no sort of conversation between the older Dalek, the newer Daleks, even if they should kill them. But I feel like if we were in the Dalek mindset, which we've just seen from this episode, it would be a bit more of, should we kill them? Should we exterminate them? Is this right? Oddly enough. Anyway, that's the characterisation of the Dalek, which I think is a bit different.
They seem less definite. Like, certainly in New Who, it is just like, there is one plan, it's kill everything in sight. This one is, like, they're creating interesting plans and traps. They're luring the characters in. And they're very different. And you can also, just from their chart, how much that evolution has undergone since 63. Yeah, it's very interesting. And I quite like the Daleks in this. I think they're great.
And I think, strangely enough, because we've had discussions about voice, because we found a montage of all the different Dalek voices, and we're saying which Briggs is our favourite one, current voice of a Dalek. However, despite not having anything to look back on, I'm going to say which these are probably second best.
These are really good Daleks. I mean, the voice and the look for 1963 is really, really good. Really good.
It's like what I was saying at the end of last episode. They came across their sort of like spotlight enemy, their standout enemy, very fast.
Yeah, they were fantastic from the off.
I was comparing it to the Borg in Star Trek, and it took them basically most of the Next Generation before they came across the Borg.
Yeah, that was like series 3 or 4 of TNG would have been Borg.
Yeah, but this was episode 2 of the first season. Story 2 of the first season, even. Straight in there with the Daleks.
Yeah. And they're immediately very, very good. I mean, even... Alright, the exterminations look cheap, let's be honest. But they have a sense of fear. You can see why there were kids terrified of the Daleks in 1963, 1964. You really can. Like, back then, this would have been like, whoa.
However, I do have to admit, I did laugh at the Daleks at some points. Particularly when they're holding up sheets of paper to each other on their suckers.
They had to look. They were improvising.
It looked like they had literally just sucked it into the sucker and then were just going, I can't read this myself, mate. Just read it. Just read it. You read it instead. Reading takes 2 Daleks here.
Reading is a 2 Dalek process.
It just looked ridiculous, I'll be honest.
It's why Dalek Book Club is so popular. They need twice the guests.
Imagine how many people it takes to change the page. So they have to have one to hold it, one to read it, and one sucker to sort of half pass it over, because they can't then cross over the other person's hand. So I'm going to say around 4 Daleks.
Take, 4 Daleks to turn the page of a book?
That's my hypothesis, yeah. It's instead of how many people does it take to change the light bulb, it's how many Daleks it takes to read the book.
I was about to say, well, how many Daleks would it take to change a light bulb then, Owen?
1, if it's the levitating Daleks, because then they can just they can fly up, suck it, and then turn it around.
The modern Daleks, they have got no problem. But these old Daleks, I reckon you're looking at... You might be able to do it with 1 Dalek, but you'd need a lot of effort.
You need a lift.
Yeah, you need a lift to do it, but the lift has its own light. What if it's the light in the lift? Just got this like eternal struggle of a Dalek in a lift, constantly trying with their sucker to reach a light bulb they'll never hit.
It's a difficult one. It depends, because their suckers actually extend quite far.
Oh yeah, they've got quite long suckers in this one.
So it could be quite easy.
Yeah, it depends how high up it is. Let's analyse the rooms here. That's a good point.
That's a good point, actually. In the sets, the roofs aren't that high in most of the corridors.
Yeah, they're not that high. Do you reckon they could get up there?
There's actually something which I was going to mention, going slightly back on track. But did you notice how the corridor sets because the Doctor and companions gets imprisoned after they venture into the Dalek town. The Dalek comes in to give them food. The hallways aren't big enough for Daleks to turn around. They just kind of awkwardly reverse.
Yeah, they just kind of reverse out.
And every time I saw that made me laugh.
It just makes you think that, right then, Daleks, why have you built an underground city that isn't fit for purpose?
Anyway, let's go slightly back on track from Daleks changing light bulbs.
Which I think is as valid a point as anything we're going to make for however long this lasts.
I think this is a thing which we're going to just have to ask for people. Tweet us at Black Archive Pod on Twitter and tell us how many Daleks will it take to change a light bulb or to change a page of a book at Dalek Book Club.
Either or is fine. You can also, if you're an avid Doctor Who fan, hypothesise how other aliens of the series would do with light bulb changing. Perhaps the Slitheen have a technique we don't know about.
That's actually a good point, because their claws are very big, so I don't know how much... Let's go off. Let's stop. Let's stop this.
Right, we will stop this, but I'm just going to say they are tall enough, because they're, they're like 7 feet, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they'd be tall enough to get there, but it's the claws that might cause problems for them. Let's go chronologically.
Yes.
Right, so, chronologically, here's my summation of what happens. Doctor and companions arrive, realising that the planet is dead. They have a look around. They see a city in the distance. They try to go back to the ship. Susan feels a touch on her hand. And then next thing you know, they are suddenly finding themselves in a underground city. Because the TARDIS misfires.
It doesn't misfire. The Doctor tricks them into thinking it has misfired.
Of course, yeah, sorry. Doctor tricks them, takes them to the city where Barbara is cornered by a Dalek. That's episode 1. They meet the Daleks and they realise there's a war going on with the Thals. And, Owen, if you want to jump in on the Thals, which is an interesting one.
So, I'm not going to jump in Thals, but I'm going to jump in with the first half of what you've just said, so we can discuss the other stuff which is going on.
All right.
So this is something which I was discussing last week. The Geiger counter in the TARDIS. It has a flashing light. They were in that ship for at least a night. How did no one notice a flashing light?
Don't worry about these things. If it doesn't have a sound effect, no one hears it.
But flashing lights are the most irritating things to notice.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where, as a scriptwriter myself, I look at that and go, Terry, you haven't thought about this. They would have probably noticed that. Because what ends up happening is they don't figure it out until second episode.
No, like, I understand Susan not noticing it first time. It's a faulty Geiger counter. But surely when you go outside of the TARDIS and notice which everything looks dead, it's a petrified forest, especially the Doctor, surely he must be sat there going, what could have caused this? But he doesn't. He doesn't go and double check. He just goes on.
Yeah. And next thing you know, episode 2 is when they figure out that they've all got radiation sickness, which is a whole drama.
Yes, and actually, going on to the transition between episode 1 and episode 2, because last week we were complaining about their cliffhangers. They learned how to do cliffhangers properly on episode 1 between episode 1 and episode 2.
They really did, didn't they? Because best cliffhanger they've done.
Yeah. Because before that, if it was, oh look, caves have had their skulls caved in.
Like, sure, but this one is like we see the plunger coming out. Barbara's in great jeopardy and peril. We don't even see anything more of that at the Dalek. It's a great introduction to.
And that then moves us on to episode 2 when they get imprisoned. When they get imprisoned, they send Susan out to get the anti-radiation drugs from the Thals. They meet up. Susan sends them a note, which I think Daleks might have falsified bits of. I'm still not entirely sure in my head what happened there.
A little bit, yeah.
I felt like something had happened, but nothing was overly said. So I think something like that happened. The only time I felt tense so far during the first and second story in this was that scene when they're in for jail trying to get rid of the power from the Daleks. That's the only time I felt tense so far.
Yeah, because that is... The good thing about why that works is that they've built up how powerful the Daleks are very, very well. So you know that the stakes are high.
Yeah. So, they're in for jail. They figure out which Daleks receive their power from metal floors, so they put an insulation underneath it. Which brings us on to a point which we both agreed we wanted to talk about and complain about. How much the Daleks have changed.
Yeah, the Daleks essentially needing... Well, they kind of work like they literally say it in the script, don't they? They work like dodgems at a fairground.
Yeah, they need static electricity from the floor.
Which is great from an educational standpoint, because obviously DW was meant to be educational at the time, and that's why the BBC put it there. So it's a nice little lesson on how static electricity works and how everything's conducting and why putting insulation down is a really good solution. But certainly compared to, great big flying Daleks we've got now, I mean, it really has come a long way.
Yeah, because, I mean, if we look at that and how the Dalek changed the light bulb when it can't even leave the floor...
Yeah, although, if they can touch the roof, if it's all made of metal, they're still getting static.
The plunger rubber, though, isn't it? We need to get off this subject.
No, it's rubber metal. I don't know.
But also, the other thing as well, which I mentioned later on in the episode, which is my favourite part, is we essentially get high Daleks. Daleks, which are just high on anti-radiation drugs. Just go...
It's unbelievable. I was going to bring that up. I didn't think we'd seen the full breadth of the serial. And then what was it? Episode 5, wasn't it? This happened where they're getting the they get the drug.
Fairly
testing.
sure it was episode 5.
Yeah, they get and all of a sudden it's that POV wavy shot where it's just like. Aah!
It's just that for Daleks, it's just going to go. It was essentially. It was essentially the Dalek with just those Daleks floating around himself, like Bohemian Rhapsody, just like that.
Are you saying that Queen copied Doctor Who?
So essentially the whole thing with the regeneration, isn't it? I can't remember which Doctor experience. Either I don't think it's 1 and 2, but I don't think it's 2 to 3. I think it's 3 to 4. Isn't that essentially what their regeneration is for Bohemian Rhapsody, where they have the Doctors facing around each other?
Yes. No, that's 2. That's 2. Yeah, because that's after Trial of a Time Lord.
Okay.
Yeah, that's from Troughton to Pertwee is the regeneration you're thinking of.
Yeah, that's essentially what they did there. So we then meet the Fowls, which are very deeply pacifist after... Because essentially the backstory between Fowls and Daleks is that there was a 1,000-year war, 500-year war. I'm not entirely sure how long it was. It was quite a long war.
I think 500 years.
So...
They said.
Well, the Daleks were essentially hunkered down, experimenting on themselves. The Fowls essentially loop back on themselves with getting changed by radiation stuff to be quite handsome. I'm going to say that.
Turn out well.
But they're now deeply pacifist because they don't want to make the same mistakes they made previously, which comes into the interesting bit about Doctor Who, which particularly everyone complains about now. How it's very political.
Yeah, there is a lot of subtext in this programme.
I'm going to go as far as saying it's not subtext. It's very clearly stated at some points.
It is about what a nuclear war would do. And certainly in 1963, that was a worry.
Not even that. So what essentially the argument which they're putting... What the arguments they're saying here is that the Daleks are essentially massive racists, potentially Nazis.
I'd say Nazis.
And Ian at one point literally goes, they hate anything which isn't themselves. So essentially what the entire story is essentially saying which you can't be a pacifist against extremism.
Yeah, which is a big statement.
It's very bluntly said. It's not really even subtext. It's straight up said.
Yeah, it is because after they escape and then they go through that whole episode 4 is like a whole ambush where the Thals are coming from one end and the Daleks are sort of following them from the back, which is really great. But by the time they get out,
it's actually something which I've cut you off there and go back on that bit there. Something in the story which annoyed me slightly at the ambush,
which is
Ian was stood there for quite a while just watching the Fowl leader put himself in harm's way and preaching why they should be peaceful.
Yeah, he was just sort of going, yeah, say your piece. He literally did. He just sort of let him get killed. Although, what could he have done?
He could have at least said, run. Which
But
at least would give him a running start.
I think the tension in episode 4 comes from the idea that you don't fully know what the Daleks are going to do directly. Like, I think in hindsight, because we've had all of this Doctor Who now, we know what the Daleks are going to do because they're Daleks. But back in 1963, no one really knew that the Daleks would just straight up kill the guy.
Yes.
So I think it's the shock and the indecision that works there.
Yeah. Anyway, what we were saying about fouls and politics and all that stuff. Sorry, I cut you off completely.
Yeah. Anyway, all I was going to say was once they get out of that situation and the leader is killed, the new guy, which I'm going to get the name of because they've all got classically odd names as they did in the 60s. Aladon, that's it. Aladon becomes the new leader and is saying, we're a pacifist race. We're not going to make the same mistakes. And Ian is just like, what do you mean? Of course you're going to fight. You fools. Pick up your weapons now.
And it then becomes a very interesting, almost moral fight within Ian about whether he's right or wrong about getting the fouls to fight for them. Because essentially, just for a bit of plot as well for this bit here, just so you know what we're talking about, the Doctor essentially removed a part of the TARDIS to say we can't leave, we're missing this part. But then the Daleks then take it off Ian, that piece which the Doctor broke. And then they then have to go back into there. So they discuss with Fowles trying to work out whether they should break into the Daleks' lair, essentially. And Ian has this really good moral argument with himself for Fowles, and then later for companions and Doctor as well.
It holds through the whole episode. And it gives... Ian's got the most depth out of the companions by miles. At least for now. And he, like I said before about him sort of trying to be the Doctor, he's having that internal moral struggle. And it goes through the whole thing. And it just leads to really interesting character moments. And he gets to be a bit of an action man, and he sort of does a bit of everything. Whereas with Susan and Barbara, I mean, they're getting better, but they're still not really on the same level.
So I see what on your notes, you've literally put Susan and Barbara get to do more things.
Susan and Barbara do get to do more things. I mean, Susan obviously gets to do that running through the forest in 2 because Ian's legs get done. This is another interesting point. Ian, when they initially see the Daleks are like, move here. And the Doctor and Susan move straight away, and Barbara's already in prison by this point. And then Ian doesn't move immediately, so the Daleks paralyse him.
Which I think... I don't know if this is true, but I'm fairly sure that might be the only time the Daleks don't just go straight to kill.
It might be, yeah.
Because it's never, especially not in the new series, I don't know if it's just because, as we were saying right at the beginning, the Daleks have so much more depth.
In the new series, it's just about fear.
Yeah. So which I think is a different way of looking at it. And also, when they shoot, I was going to mention this, it's utterly meaningless stuff. I really like the little tickly bits which come out when they shoot. Do you know what I'm on about?
Yeah, I know. It's a nice effect.
Yeah.
For what they had at the time, bearing in mind Doctor Who 1963 is a £2.70 per episode budget, they've done very, very well. Like, the Daleks look as good as they do now. Yeah.
It's really good. But then also, go back to the moral argument side of things. Ian sort of drags a woman to go to the... It's sort of... Ian realises it. Ian's persuaded by the Doctor and Barbara, which they need to get the Fowls involved. So Ian just goes, right, I'm going to essentially get these people to try to kill me.
It's a tactic.
He essentially goes, look at all of this history. They essentially have their massive history bank. He goes, right, I'm going to take this to sell you out as for Daleks. And they go, okay, we won't do anything to you. So then Ian just goes, right, I'll grab this woman. I'm going to take her to the Daleks. They can experiment on her. You know? And then at that point, it's a thing which gets the Fowls to realise they might actually have to not be pacifists. It's massively against pacifism, isn't it, really?
It's very against inaction, but I think that comes from that will have come from like the Second World War and the Cold War, because that subtext was really the Second World War happened as a result of inaction from the side of the West, or I say the West, like Germany isn't part of it. The
appeasement campaign between Britain and Germany, essentially.
Particularly Chamberlain, and basically just going to Hitler, oh, don't invade Czechoslovakia. Hitler will probably say, oh, you invaded Czechoslovakia. Damn it, Adolf. Well, you had this conversation.
So we then get to the point where they essentially do a two-pronged attack. They go through the caves, a guy kills himself.
Oh yeah, that's a
essentially,
whole thing.
sacrifices himself.
Basically, they go over a lake. So, hold on, let me do this in detail. So, the Doctor and Susan...
It was a cavern, really.
Yeah, more of a cavern in the way they did it. The Doctor and Susan go in sort of via the front door, get captured and try to work their way out, whereas the flip side is Ian and Barbara are leading a Thal rescue team, but to get there, they have to go through a toxic lake, which the Daleks are fine with, but the Thals aren't. And that leads to this very tense sequence.
I don't think the Daleks are okay with it. I think they just live with it because it acts essentially like a moat to the back entrance to their city.
Yeah, it's a defense mechanism for sure.
But so they essentially go into caves, caverns, try to find a way into the into the Daleks layer, into the Daleks layer, and all that stuff. And then we're coming up to the end.
Yeah, because by this point we're at episode 7. I mean, the episode 6 cliffhanger, I should actually make a note of, is really good again, because you've got that classic Thal hanging by a thread. Ian himself is not looking too stable, and they're really looking for a helping hand. And this lake is toxic, so if they fall in, it's done. What? And then poor what is his name? I love this note system. Antodus or Antodus is the man who gives himself up. He cuts the rope with his own blade to save the others.
To make sure the other guys can go through, which honestly probably destroyed Ian, because Ian's moral thing was, I don't want people to die because of me.
And then it has happened, but then you get into the theme of, like, is it inevitable that that'll happen?
And then we get into the ending. What did you think about the ending of the episode?
Well, it's kind of a mix, because there's some great things in it, and there's some not so good bits in it.
I think it lacked the impact which the earlier parts of this story had.
I agree with that. What I did like, and what I think did have impact, was when the Doctor realised exactly what the Daleks were capable of as a species.
It's what we were talking about. It's what we were talking about earlier on. This is when the Doctor essentially realises, which I can't just stand back anymore. I need to get myself involved.
Because he recognises that if the Daleks get out of there, and I mean he starts it by baiting out his own TARDIS. He says, I'll give you the secrets to this damn machine, but then he realises that they're just going to use that to go across the universe if they were ever to get it. Spoiler, they will, and start killing people left and right, and up and down, and in all dimensions.
So this is something which you've got written in your notes. I want you to explain, because I'm not entirely sure what you mean by it. Daleks being killers, does the Doctor start it?
What I mean by that is that with the Doctor essentially revealing that he has the ability to travel through time in the ship, he gives the Daleks the knowledge that it is possible to do that. Perhaps if he was never there, they would never acquire that knowledge, and they may have just lived a continued existence on Death Planet with nothing else going on, relatively harmless to the galaxy.
Yeah. Okay. So, overall then, you thought the ending was good on a character level.
Good on a character level, but then in terms of the set piece itself, a little underwhelming.
Especially with how tense the earlier scenes were, especially in sort of like the eps when they have to escape, or that side of things. I honestly didn't really... I obviously care they escape, but I didn't feel intense, I didn't feel invested in their plans.
In the end, they kind of came across as bumper cars. It was a little disappointing, because they were just able to push them around. And
yeah, this is something which got me as well. Is they spent the entirety of the episode hyping these guys up as being the ultimate killer, and then they turn into bumper cars.
Yeah, when the time comes, they don't shoot up. And one of the last few shots we see of Daleks is them hanging upside down, just getting pushed around on the floor like they're shopping trolleys at Asda. It's not the way for them to go out in this episode. It is underwhelming.
Yeah. So there we go. That's episode 2, I think. We've dilly-dallied away. We've
a little.
Haven't taken a solid path through. So at the end, let's do our roundup out of 10. What did you think of the episode?
I am going to give the Daleks an 8. I'm going to give it an 8. Great introduction to the Daleks. Great development.
I'm going to give it a 7.
Give it a 7.
So it was better than The Unearthly Child, but it was still slow.
Oh yeah, the pacing is off. Certainly in the early stages, it's very cumbersome and laboured. But it gets there.
So currently, in our TARDIS companion group, we've got 3 companions. What do our current companion group have in modern time Doctor Who? We've got 3 companions, and the constant complaint is that they've got too many people in the TARDIS.
Yes, that is a massive complaint.
So we've just done episode 3 of Doctor Who. For the 11th serial, I think they call them. So that's half that, so we're going to say around 5.5.
Yeah.
So we've gone through 5.5 episodes here.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Who has more depth? Graham, Yaz, and the other one whose name I don't remember, or Ian, Susan, and Barbara?
By miles, Ian, Susan, and Barbara. But this is the thing. The complaint with Chibnall is not that it's down to just the amount of characters. Yes, it makes things harder if you're thinking of it from a writing level. The fact is the characters just aren't good. I'm not even saying that Susan and Barbara are good characters. They're capable characters. They do a job, but I wouldn't call them textbook examples of depth or anything like that. Like, I'm sorry, but who the and please leave that in. Who the cares about Ryan Sinclair? Whoever cared?
That's his name.
That's his
I
name.
forgot his name.
And I had to really remember that. It's not like, Rose Tyler, Martha Jones, Donna Noble, Amy Pond, even Rory. I care about that wet wipe a million times more than I care about Ryan Sinclair. That man has the emotional range of a teaspoon. And it's not his fault, he's acting well. It's just the writing is not there for them.
And with that rant, we end this episode.
It's amazing how in 1963 they genuinely had better companion writing than we do now.
I just thought I'd introduce this idea to you.
No, I quite like that. I quite like that comparison. I haven't even thought about it before.
Yeah,
it's really damning.
I was watching it thinking, you know what, I care more about Ian already.
Genuinely, I care a lot more about Ian. The only reason I ever cared about any one of those 3 is because one of them is Bradley Walsh, and I quite like Bradley Walsh as a guy. That really is
right,
it.
So let's just warm up to the next episode.
Okay.
We can leave. We've overstayed our welcome by 15 minutes. It'll probably get cut down.
Oh yeah, we'll edit it down.
We might remove Daleks changing light bulbs and
no,
Dalek
we're not
Book
going to
Club.
be removing that. I know we're not going to remove that. That's staying in.
So the last scene of TARDIS, so the little changeover is the TARDIS essentially explodes.
Yeah, whole great big explosion. Everyone's falling about. Goodness knows what's going on. All we know is that the episode is called The Edge of Destruction.
Maybe they've finally found out how to make their companions faint more than once when the TARDIS takes off.
They do love their fainting on Doctor Who.
So, anyway, as you did the intro, you also did the outro.
Well, if you've made it this far, then you've made it to the end of the episode. You have better endurance than I ever will. Thanks very much for ploughing through this with us on Into the Black Archive. And if you've liked what you heard, you can get in touch with us as well. We're on Twitter. That's at Black Archive Pod. Or you can email us if you'd like. Or if you'd like to send us hate mail, we'll take that as well. It's, what is it? It's blackarchivepod@gmail.com, isn't it, Owen?
All in one. Well done.
All in one, yes. And lowercase.
And remember to subscribe on wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, on any feed that takes your fancy. We will be back next week with another classic Doctor Who story from the William Hartnell days, and we'll be asking the big ethical questions. Just how many Daleks does it take to change a light bulb?
And how many Daleks does it take to read a book?
Find out more about our slow descent into insanity next week. I'm James Stevenson, he's Owen Cranston. We'll see you then. Goodbye.
Thank you for making it to the end of In the Black Archive. If you managed to make it this far, please remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.